Benjamin Castle are Americans. Watching the footy.
Liam Ryan saying, kick it my way, I want to jump over the pack, and here he comes! Ryan!
This is Buddy Franklin! This is the greatest showman!
Got the handball off to Myers. Myers looking for the lead of Stengel. Gee, they're good. Gee, they're sharp. Razzle dazzle Rioli.
Oh, who else? McDonald!
From inside the centre square. Boys kick the goal. Boys kick the goal. From inside the centre. Fat. I can't believe that.
Good time of day, everyone, and welcome to Final Season. This is episode 206 of Americans Watching the Footy. I am Benjamin Castle, coming to you from San Diego, California, where I am having some unbearably hot nights right now.
I'm Ethan Castle, coming to you from South San Francisco, California, where it was kind of warm today, but not terrible. Presently 62. Usually it's a little cooler at night. Learn Fahrenheit if you don't know what that means.
It's still 72 here at 11 p.m.
Yeah, that's not good sleeping weather. I understand your complaint.
Yeah, I think we're both hot sleepers.
Giggity.
Giggity. This is our Finals Week 1 preview. All 4 games will be on American networks. Fox Sports 2 for 3 of them. Fox Sports 1 for 1 of them. You have no excuse.
I mean, I would think most of the people listening to this are already hooked. So we're kind of preaching to the choir by saying that.
At the same time, you have no excuse. And for those of you who are fans of non-finalist clubs, make sure you go back and listen to So You Didn't Crack the 8, our 2-part special on all 10 of those teams that missed out.
And if you're a non-finalist club, haha, sucks to be you.
I think that's also fairly appropriate for Ethan to say because Geelong play in the first final, the second qualifying final against Port out at Adelaide Oval, which is a 7:10 p.m. start time locally. Ethan, I imagine you will still be singing Never Tear Us Apart at 2:39 a.m.
Yeah, something like that.
5:40 a.m. Eastern, 2:40 Pacific for Americans, 7:40 p.m. for the Victorian crowd and other Pacific states. And Australia on FS2 here in the States. This is second versus third, both coming off wins of different levels of comfort 2 weeks ago.
It's weird thinking, like, it feels like it should be a lot longer until finals, and yet, as of the time of recording this, we're like under 28 hours away. It feels more distant. Am I the only one who feels that way?
I just think in general this year for both of us on personal levels has been faster for any reason.
Maybe it's just because it's the first final. And, you know, having the week off, it kind of like disconnects you for a minute.
Women's round 1 was fun. Nice to see the Eagles pick up a win in Daisy Pierce's coaching debut.
Had a couple of the games on, watched most of the Cats and D's. Brisbane didn't get the respect they deserved.
Am I crazy to now also want the Lions to be bounced out in this round just to stick it to the Starcevich family even more?
Yes.
Well then.
Just because Dad said something dumb doesn't mean Brandon, who's had a really nice end of the season, should have to face any extra criticism.
I think it's his uncle.
Whatever the relation is. Anyway, Geelong and Port, that's really what we're here to talk about. These teams met just once in the home and away season, a 6-point Port win at Geelong, a game that I felt really confident going into. Friday night at home, but it turns out Port Friday night footy is kind of their specialty. So I guess I should be glad that this game is a Thursday in that sense. A 50-point first quarter for the Power. They led by 49 in the second. Nobody covered Willie Rioli. Rhys Stanley was so bad he got subbed out mid-second quarter, not by being hurt, just by being terrible. I thought that was going to be the last time we saw him, and he's managed to totally turn things around since then and put himself back in it. And then there was a controversial call, could have cut it to a point with a little under 2 minutes left when Jai Clark was not allowed to play on. And then instead of a Jeremy Cameron goal, Ollie Henry gets a behind, and that cuts the lead down to 6 and allows Port to bring it in from the goal square, and that was about it. Last time these teams met in finals was not fun. 2021, Port 86-43 with 4 goals from
Orazio Fantasia.
And finals in South Australia have not gone well for the Cats. They are 0-5 in finals in the city of Adelaide.
And not just that, the average margin is 36.
I come into this game thinking either we're just going to get blown out from the start, blown out in the third quarter, or win. I don't expect a close loss.
Why exactly is that?
I have no reasoning for it whatsoever.
And I base that on absolutely nothing.
We've won games at the Adelaide Oval in the last couple of seasons against both the Crows and Power in pretty impressive fashion. It's not like winning there is like a foreign concept. I just feel like if it's a loss, it's just Port's midfield is just going to go to town, which could totally happen. And if it's a win, I just feel like there's going to be a lot of different contributors doing some pretty clutch stuff. Porter favored by 12.5, which is a little higher than I expected. I see nothing wrong with the line being there.
When I just think about this matchup, and I keep going back to the whole midfield dilemma potentially for Geelong, I mean, a win against Port would require a top-tier game from Patrick Dangerfield in the first place, and then the class would kind of emanate outward from him. And I just got a feeling that Sean Mann will need to step up in a way that he kind of did in that road win against Freo. I feel like Mann is just kind of the piece that can help hold everything together, because otherwise Willem Drew could have too large of an impact in terms of pressuring, etc., etc. I think the biggest intrigue, though, in terms of the actual list issues, for Port at least, it's more toward halfback, because with Kane Farrell out for the year,
Unit lost.
There's no one clear solution.
I'm not really sure what the solution is there either, between not having him and Dan Houston, who's still suspended, of course. Taking the ball out of the back half, I think that's just more opportunities for Ryan Burton, but I don't know what you do elsewhere.
If I were a Port fan, my thoughts would be, don't try to mess up too much. Make as few changes as possible. Don't bring Darcy Burn-Jones back. Don't try to do something weird with Rosie. Just have Josh Singh come in and have him and Jace Burgoyne take some shifts between halfback, flank, and wing. I think the more you mess with things, the more you change the structure now, the more problems you're going to have.
If I recall correctly, Sin had a couple big moments in that game at Cardinia earlier this season.
That was his first game of the year. He had 16 disposals in that game.
For some reason, I thought he had a goal. He didn't. Who am I thinking of that had a goal in that game where I was like, that's not a guy who should be scoring one? Well, Kane Farrell had 2 because they didn't pay attention to him.
Maybe it's just Rioli kicking 4-3 because nobody bothered.
Yeah, I would like to think that's not going to happen again. Again, if Port win this game, it's going to be more just they have the better midfield. But one thing that I want to do as we break down each of these games, we're going to each in like one sentence, ideally like 3 words or fewer, tell me why each team will win the flag and why each team won't. And then you can elaborate more. But I want you to start with just like the 3-word version. So Benjamin, I'll start with you. Why will Port win the flag?
The horny one.
Here he is again, the horny one.
Fair enough. I think he's been awesome second half of the season as well.
I think he's honestly been maybe the most dynamic player in the whole AFL in maybe the kind of back third or back quarter of the season. And I don't think he's going to get his due. And whereas Connor Rosie has been struggling to have that same sort of inside and forward impact, Horn Francis has made that a non-issue. So if Rosie can get more flexible, if he can get up to a better form, then he would really augment what's already a pretty complete midfield list.
And why won't they win the flag?
Halfback what? Kind of the reasons I enumerated earlier. I'm not going with anything in terms of, it's Ken Hinckley, which I think would be a completely valid option for a lot of people. And I don't know if you were planning on taking that, Ethan, but not having your 2 most important halfback movers could really make a lot of things dry up. It's going to mean a lot of responsibility on Logan Evans.
I do like Logan Evans moving the ball out of the back, especially when they go out wide to him, but I don't know how he's going to do in a more magnified role. All right, my turn. Why will Port win this in the simplest terms possible? Midfield's really good. This is a midfield that can very well take over any game against any opponent, no matter what caliber. And why they won't? Struggles in both 50s. Simple. You could have some like Pete Asava moments, which could really cost him. Best case scenario, he just plays totally fine, but I don't see enough help for Alir being an issue. And then the forward 50, it's not like Todd Marshall has been great. Mitch Georgiadis, I think, has played about as well as he possibly can. Charlie Dixon has shown signs of age. And yeah, you could just also go over the I'll believe it when I see it reason. Why will Geelong win the flag?
First, I was just going to touch again on Alir because I'm glad you brought that up. When I talked about a more magnified role for Logan Evans, it was in that whole sort of intercept sphere. I trust Evans with the movement. That's why he was the Rising Star nominee for round 24 and had just shown really well since being a midseason elevation all along. As for why Geelong will win the flag, experience could carry.
And why won't they?
Old and slow. I'm going to say it. And in fact, I did. If you don't have that top tier game from Dangerfield, where else will the class come from? You've seen some of the older players also being down. If Tom Hawkins and Cam Guthrie come back for the semifinal and prelim, that's going to just create another batch of list dilemmas there. I will say they do have Sam DeConing and Mark O'Connor available, and Lawson Humphreys and Tom Stewart are clear. But this is a team where the problem was always in the middle in the first place, and they could get really exposed in a game like this qualifier.
So I'm going to take things in a different direction. First off, what you said about Guthrie and Hawkins, just want to address that. My perception is that for one of them to get in, either someone's got to get hurt or really, really play like shit. Pretty much every best case scenario, neither of them get in. Why will the Cats win? Fresh legs. This is a team that throughout the year has been cycling guys in and out. It's not like they've ever really had to expend all their energy to get to this point. And I think now they're in a position where, hey, if you win this week, you get another 2 weeks between games, and you put yourself in a position where you are the freshest team available. The other option I could have gone with is just ability in all 50s, that this is a defense that really started to round into form at the end of the year, and a forward group that's among the best of the best, no matter if Tom Hawkins is involved or not. My X factor, by the way, is Tanner Bruhn. I think any scenario where this team wins it, he's got to really play up at the top of his level, because if he doesn't, I mean, I like Jack Bowes, but I don't like Jack Bowes against, Jason Horn-Francis and Connor Rosie. Why they won't win the flag is just midfield's not good enough, and that ties right in, As much as I like Bruin's future, as much as I like Dangerfield, as much as I like what Mana offers, can you really trust that group against a midfield like Ports where, Ollie Wines is like the number 4 guy? That's a pretty scary proposition.
Want to also mention here before we move on that this game will be the 100th for Mount Gambier's Bradley Close.
In case you haven't noticed, and you should notice because you should be watching Jeremy Cameron's YouTube videos, he and Cameron have gotten really close, no pun intended. Yeah, he was involved in like cheering Cameron off. It would be so awesome if he goes off during this finals run. I mean, the thing that makes me positive about this team is there are a lot of guys who could really step it up that have, shown flashes, but haven't really like dominated for a month. And I see a lot of guys on this team that could turn it on for a month. Ideally just 3 games, could be 4. But Tanner Bruhn is my biggest pick for that. There are a lot of people talking about the idea of, can Max Holmes get back to his early season form? What have I said how many times about Brad Close? Good things happen when he gets the ball. The difference between an 11 disposal Brad Close game and a 15 disposal Brad Close game is astronomical for this team.
Look to Friday night at the G for the Dogs and Hawks. Ethan, I will beg of you the first answers this time. Why will the Dogs win the flag?
Bont legacy run. Yes, Ed Richards and Adam Treloar and Tom Liberatore are all awesome, but this is the sort of thing where Bont could just totally go off, and I could see this be one of those where he gets the Norm Smith, even if there are other totally deserving candidates where he just kind of gets it off of recognition and legacy. And he could also win the Gary Ayers Award very easily. I think he's always a good pick for that.
Now watch him win it even if they don't make the grand final. That happened last year with Sam Walsh. And if you do have Bont winning it with the Dogs making this run, I guess it would kind of be like a reverse sort of feeling from 2016 when people thought Jason Johannesson was not deserving and instead it could have been Liam Picken. Why will they not?
Not enough consistency. Ceiling is high, floor is low. By not being in the top 4, they have no room for slip-ups, and you can't expect this team to do it 4 games in a row. I'll ask the same question to you. Why will the Dogs win the flag?
Finally, actually depth. I know that's weird to have the 2 adverbs in there, but we saw in the final couple months of this year more consistent contributions from the middle to lower part of the list, as people would consider it, the start of the season, at least. There was a question as to whether Lathan Vandermeer will be able to play this week after doing his hamstring a couple weeks back, but you have other guys who have stepped up as well. Lockie McNeil has had a really nice past couple months. Riley West, who played in the qualifying final win in the VFL, has done great things as a defensive forward and has also finally just found some consistency in terms of being in the lineup and kicking goals as well. I just want to mention Johannesson, West, Riley Garcia, James Harms, and Caleb Poulter were all notable inclusions and performers in that VFL qualifying final win. So by the time this episode's out, obviously lists will be out and chaos could erupt. And I feel like that kind of ties in with why the Dogs won't win the flag. And I'll just give it as 2 words: Bevo befuddling.
Yeah, you could see, I've questioned at times like leaving Riley Garcia out after a good game. I assume it's a lot of stuff like along those lines where they'll just make decisions that don't make sense, whether it be with the lineup altogether or like an in-game substitution decision. I assume that's what you're getting at.
Yeah, that's it. Even though at this point, I'm feeling more confident in what Beveridge has done, I just worry now, is this confidence misplaced? Or are we just going to be forced to eat our words from the past however many years and say, okay, he can actually do this?
I mean, even if they do, I would say they did it in the most inefficient way possible.
In the 10 years under Luke Beveridge, they have yet to make top 4.
Which with the talent they've had is kind of unbelievable.
Why will Hawthorn win the flag?
They're on a roll. Sometimes you just have to be the hottest team at the right time. I think you could have made that case for Collingwood last year where just like everything fell into place. Geelong was the best team in 22, but it did feel also like a lot of things fell into place. I can see that happening for Hawthorn right now, where just like everything's lining up and, it's kind of one of those like, we're too dumb to know we're supposed to lose type situations.
Yeah, I mean, I get the feeling from Geelong as well, because remember, they started that season mired in mediocrity. We were really questioning things after the round 9 loss to the Saints, and then they just didn't lose again. They won their final.
Yeah, I could see that sort of run out of this Hawthorn team.
I'm going to go in a bit of a different direction here. Complementary forward mix. Yes, there's a lot of talk about what's been going on with the back in terms of Jarman and B picking up the slack from a down year from James Sicily. But I think when you're looking forward for this team, there may not be one star, and the person that we all thought would be that Mitchell Lewis obviously hardly played this year. But everybody in that forward group and really going to half forward, even starting the midfield line, they play so well off each other. You see Jai Newcomb do really nice things, being able to stretch his physical play forward. Connor McDonald can bring things inside, but is also comfortable to stay out and redirect. Jack Ginnivan's chaos is good chaos, and the same can be said for Nick Watson now that he's found greater accuracy. And then on the taller side, I have absolutely loved what I've seen out of Cal Shadir for so many reasons. When he isn't marking, he's just making as many contests as he can and getting the ball to ground where Hawthorn tend to do well, and that could trip up a more aerially inclined defense like the Bulldogs. By the way, Deer made his debut against the Bulldogs in Hawthorn's 7-point round 8 win at Marvel, and he kicked 2-1 in that game. Another thing I will highlight is Lloyd Meek's play throughout the year, and when Tim English has been the subject of so many questions, I think that ruck matchup could come into focus as a positive for Hawthorn again. If English is able to draw closer to even or just get things to be more effective, then I think it'll bode pretty well for the Dogs. Why will Hawthorn not win the flag?
First, I want to make a counterpoint to what you said about their forward structure. It all stems from Dylan Moore. He's the guy.
There you go. I didn't mention him for a reason because I thought it was too obvious. I see him being the source of things, but in terms of actually getting on the end point, I see a lot more effectiveness out of the other guys. And I think Moore's been highlighted a lot from his All-Australian campaign, and deservedly so. But I don't think he's the only source.
Why won't they win the flag? Not there yet. They played out of their minds for the last couple months, and that's not going to last over another 4 games. They're totally playing with house money at this point, and whether it's this week or the next week, they're going to see, hey, we've still got a ways to go to get to the big boys, similar to how their game at Cardinia Park a couple months ago went.
I'm going to look individually for this one. No Day Friday. It's not a coincidence that Hawthorn's best play started when Will Day was able to be in tune with things and fill the gaps everywhere on the list. I think Hawthorn can learn to play without him, but if they fall short on Friday, then the discussion will come back to Day.
Because Day got hurt round 23 against Richmond.
This is the 6th finals meeting between the Dogs and Hawks. Hawthorn lead that head-to-head in finals 4-1. And their last meeting was the 2016 second semifinal, a 23-point Bulldogs win that saw the Hawks get bounced out in straight sets and have their chance at a 4P. And thanks to a huge 9-goal run between the third and fourth quarter for the Bulldogs, Liam Pickett and Jake Stringer were huge in that.
I guess we never gave the full details on this game, so I might as well do that. This game is Friday, 2:40 a.m. our time, 5:40 a.m. Eastern time. It is on Fox Sports 2. It is 7:40 p.m. locally, of course, and it'll be nice Friday afternoon football at 12:40 p.m. in Tanzania.
Where there's a burgeoning footy scene.
I mean, if they're singing "See the Bombers Fly Up" in Uganda.
For the Bulldogs, Adam Treloar should play despite some calf tightness in round 24. I guess the biggest difficulty here is what to do regarding Artie Jones after his brilliant sub performance.
I think you just keep him in the sub role.
What if Vandermeer gets up to play? It's just tough to keep him in when you got all those other smalls to deal with. There was no Riley West last week after he had surgery on his jaw. It's going to be tough to keep things in. We will obviously advocate for Artie Jones. Also want to congratulate Liam Jones because it will be his 200th game and his first final.
It's not quite David Swallow, but it's impressive. For the Hawks, I think the biggest question is, how the heck do you get Chankwath Jaff back in? Because he should be ready to go coming off his hamstring injury, but it's like, where do you put him in? I mean, I guess, I think I would just probably let Morrison do a little midfield work. They had Amon listed in the center line to start the game. You could slide him back. You could slide Sicily forward, and you could get Jath in there. I think that's how I would do it.
Finding a way to get both Jath and Harry Morrison in is difficult, but feasible. And would you just back in Finn McGuinness to stay in for Day?
I think Finn McGuinness would be the most likely one to come out, because it's not like they've been tagging lately, even though I love the idea of having someone to tag against the Dogs. Even if you don't deploy it from the start, I like the idea of having it in your back pocket. Man, I don't know what the heck you do with this.
The other options from the VFL would probably be Josh Ward and Jai Sarong, and we've been very complimentary of Ward in his time this year.
I see no spot for him, and that's by no fault of his own.
I think somebody like Morrison is keeping him out, so...
it's going to be legitimately tough to get CJ in. I think it involves, shuffling some deck chairs, or maybe you conveniently find out that someone else has been dealing with some sort of injury. Now that I realize that, wait a minute, Day got hurt against Richmond and already missed the season finale, it's like, where do you have a spot for anything, honestly?
I feel like McGuinness would be the easier one to shuffle out because he really has transitioned away from that tagging rule. That's really all that I can think of right now.
Yeah, and again, no fault of his own.
And I don't want to take out a guy like Cam McKenzie.
No, taking out McKenzie would be silly. I think McGuinness would be the one who would have to go, or you just go unchanged. As much as I would like to see CJ in there, you could also go off of the logic of he's had a couple of hamstring injuries this year. We don't want to run the risk of him getting hurt mid-game, so we're going to stick with our 23 guys that worked last time and are less likely to get hurt mid-game. Even if there is some upside that he definitely offers, I think that's a way you could rationalize it.
The Bulldogs are 4.5-point favorites. Had Day been in, do you think the Hawks would be favored?
I think it would be a couple points closer. I don't know if it would be all the way there.
I personally think it would have been within a point, but Bulldogs by half of one. These are two of the most informed teams in the competition. It's a damn shame that only one of them will be able to progress even to the second week. I think even with everything else considered in terms of having to reconfigure so much of the women's schedule with the Whitten Oval homecoming and all that being in the way, this does feel like the right sort of game to have Friday night.
Can I talk about something really stupid from Fox Footy that relates to this game?
Sorry, I'm just thinking about how they accidentally showed Reece McGuinness as playing for Carlton in one tweet.
I don't remember that, but I was just talking about their Premiership window graphic, which is literally just like representing percentage on an XY axis. Like, no, when you want to talk about a team's contending window, it's not something you can statistically measure as much. It's like, what is their age? What is their experience? When are these guys going to hit their peak? Not who's allowing the fewest points and scoring the most. It's just like a really stupid, misleading, and useless graphic. It's like more useless than the abbreviation of the plagues at Passover.
Oh God, who was that rabbi? Rabbi Yehuda?
Maybe. How would you like to be remembered like generations later, probably thousands of years later, for an abbreviation?
And even though there are a lot of things that you'd be tempted to skip in the Haggadah, we do not skip that one, and we all enjoy it. Thank you, Rabbi Yehuda.
Yeah, there's something from like a site that archives like Jewish texts talking about like, yeah, this is kind of silly. And I guess it's so you remember the order of the plagues. But even that seems not all that important. Like, we aren't going to forget which was the last one.
We'll be back right after this on Jews Watching the Footy.
Jewish!
You know, Benjamin, 78% of our listeners are between 18 and 35 years old, so they probably want to start a podcast like we did.
How did you know that number, Ethan?
Thanks to the analytics we have for Spotify for Podcasters.
Formerly known as Anchor, sorry Frio fans, Spotify for Podcasters has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast from your phone or your computer. No fancy software needed.
It's so easy you can edit it while drunk.
And Spotify for Podcasters doesn't just allow you to upload to Spotify, you can also distribute your podcast on platforms like Apple, Stitcher, and more, just like we do.
Best of all, it's completely free.
Not only is it free, you can even make money from listener support or ad revenue. Hint, hint.
Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to podcasters.spotify.com to get started today.
And we're back on Americans Watching the Footy. We're talking about finals. You can find us commenting on finals and all sorts of other stuff on Twitter at Americans Footy. We also have a Linktree page at Americans Footy. I think we're like a very small percentage of Linktrees that don't have a link to an OnlyFans.
I guess we should be proud?
No, we need to step our game up.
Come on, step it up!
That link tree could also take you to our Instagram and YouTube pages. Same handle, Americans Footy. Shouldn't be that hard to find us. Individually, he is at Castle Media and I am at Benjamin HK01. Where is the executive producer?
He's not presently in the room, but he's on Instagram at Cat Named Brian. Also, sometimes he'll tweet from our account, signed with a G. We sign our tweets so you know who's who.
People make fun of us for it. Continue doing that.
So normally I would be annoyed that there's no Sunday final, but considering that it would probably overlap with college football, like I'm really not going to complain that much. I have enough going on American Saturday afternoon/evening anyway, that I am fine with having two Saturday finals, although I will probably not be caught up on the first final Saturday until at least halftime, because I'll be racing back from a high school football game. Won't be like as late as last time, I would think, though, because that last one was an 8 p.m. game where I had to do that with multiple TV timeouts because the game was on ESPNU. And then Max Holmes didn't realize what the score was and kicked the go-ahead goal when he thought he just kind of put the game away. Very underrated part of that whole situation.
For some reason, all I can think of right now is the Tyson Stengel Be Real.
Ooh, I hadn't thought about that in a while. So even though it's being played after the second qualifying final, the first qualifying final is on Saturday, 10:20 p.m. still Friday here, 1:20 a.m. on the East Coast, 3:20 p.m. locally. It is on Fox Sports 1 in the U.S. It is Sydney Derby 29 with the Swans hosting the Giants. This is their fourth finals meeting. The first place Swans at 17-6. the 15-8
Orange team.
in fourth.
You know, there were questions about whether or not it was right for the Giants to have made all those late changes last week. I think they're okay with it. They are 3-0 in Sydney Derby finals, and their last finals meeting was a ridiculous one-pointer in Launceston in 2021. It was a 6-7 game. There were only a few really accurate players, namely Lance Franklin, Isaac Heaney, and Toby Green. The Giants totally went on the defensive for the fourth, and because the Swans could only manage to kick 2 goals 7, they barely held on to be smashed by Geelong and Perth.
Now, I am not by any means going to accuse the Giants of throwing the round 24 game. I just think they prioritized health over finishing, second versus third or fourth. And they have every right to make that decision for themselves.
I didn't have a problem with it either. And considering how dynamic a couple of those players were, who they left out, I don't think it was the easiest of decisions. Toby Bedford and Brent Daniels. Bedford is a test. Daniels will be playing. Lockie Ash will also be playing. That will be his 100th game after having missed round 24 from a dangerous tackle suspension.
I think you could have made an argument to leave him out with just how well some of the other pieces have gone.
I would not, because of how it could unlock play from a better Lockie.
Whitfield?
All-Australian Lockie Whitfield. We've talked about our contention with that already, but you saw what he did in rounds 22 and 23 when he was allowed to venture downfield.
Sydney got some huge news as well heading into this one with ins and outs. Unsurprisingly, both Isaac Heaney and Tom McCartan will be back in. They were managed for the final home and away game with the minor premiership pretty much locked up. But most significantly, Justin McInerney, who we never really had a timetable on his PCL injury from round 18, he should be back. And so should Tom Papley, who loves the celebration and injured his foot in round 19. I think getting McInerney back is enormous. Cannot overstate how much he matters to this team and everything they're trying to do. I think their odds of winning the flag go up very, very significantly with his return.
Is he why they will win the flag?
He's part of why. You want my short answer?
Go.
Simple. They're just the best team. Now, you might have to get a little more creative to come up with reasons why they won't win the flag. But first, what's your reason they will win it?
My line with yours, and I'm going to say top to bottom, because we saw the depth these past few weeks be able to make up for some of the absences in a way. I don't think McInerney's absence was ever truly made up for, but it's going to be tough for Caden Cleary to stay in, for example, their academy graduate who did some brilliant things in the past couple games, because Tom Papley's going to be back in. I'm thinking about a guy like that who could be really useful as that sort of 24th, 25th guy. Hope that he would at least stay at emergency. Braden Campbell has done some really nice things on the outside, venturing further downfield as a half-forward flank in the final couple weeks. He's a potential sub-pick there, and we know what the top and middle of this list could do. I mean, it's to the point with everybody being back in that Taylor Adams could miss out.
I thought Cleary made a really good case for himself the way he played in the game against the Crows, where he really did everything within his power to stay in.
Including smothering that nuff Rory Laird.
If he's not in, it's by no fault of his own. It's just that other guys are really good. So why don't I think the Swans are going to win the flag? Peaked too early. Similar to 2022 Melbourne, they may have just played their absolute best too early. And we know that their best is as good as anybody's, if not better. But, there's a very real chance they may have just passed that peak at the wrong time. And it's just unfortunate sequencing. The other thing I could also give is just, I don't know if they're going to be able to stop some of the big opposing key forwards. Tom McCartan's damn good, but I wouldn't put him on the same level as, Aleer, Sam Taylor, some of the other top defenders out there.
I was about to say, mine is some defensive questions, and it's particularly from the sort of key standpoint. I don't want to say you don't have the types who can stop them, but it'll be more difficult for Dane Rampy and Tom McCartan to do that than some others. And when they've had their finals troubles in the past, those sorts of guys have been exposed.
It's an older defensive group for sure. A team that's got a lot of youth. See some of that age on the defensive side. If there's any spot, you're going to see it. Benjamin, why will the Giants win the flag?
I'm going to present this with a bit of a condition. If they do have the full health of guys like Bega and Snooze, Tsunami is real. And there are a few teams who, if they've got all the pieces working correctly and consistently stop that, but that's going to rely on full health and also a more open role for Whitfield. And so I think similarly, one of the real constraints is that they could almost be too fixed in some of the structures and just try to get the same people starting all the time. It doesn't just have to be Whitfield. It doesn't just have to be Himmelberg. You can move players around. So if there's an issue, especially coming up against a Swans team like this, where James Jordan has done a really nice job on Whitfield, it's that there are clear choke points in that Tsunami. So clear choke points are my 3 words.
I think my answer for both is actually going to be a little bit similar. So my answer for why they're going to win it, Stephen Canelio. He's had a really unspectacular, unremarkable home and away season, and he could totally just turn it on and win this team of flag by all of a sudden remembering, like, oh yeah, I can be one of the best midfielders out there. And then you've got a loaded core between him, Tom Green, Callum Ward could go on that veteran run. James Peakling's been awesome. Josh Kelly's had a nice year. We both really like Fit Callahan. Canelio, just like his ceiling is still so high. And maybe we've seen that for like one game this year. And that he hasn't really done any of that is honestly terrifying, because it's totally still there.
What's your counter argument?
Ineffective midfield. Like, Canelio's had a quiet year. Tom Green is lucky to ever reach 60% efficiency, and there just isn't a lot of composure behind what he does. That's really the biggest thing. This midfield is going to hinge a lot on, can Stephen Canelio get them in there and go toe-to-toe against the best of the best? Because if he does, again, that's a pretty complete group all around. Within this game, I think the other thing I want to look at is just, like, which version of Brody Grundy do we get? Because if we have the Brody Grundy that showed up in the first 2 months, I don't know how you possibly stop this team.
And my other question is, how is Kieran Briggs looking after a week off when he's had some issues with his shoulder? The Swans are 8.5-point favorites, and there are 2 ways to look at this. There's the home and away dominance, in which the Swans somewhat easily won both games. In round 8, they won by 29, and then by 27 in round 15 off the back of a 7-2 second quarter. Errol Golden won the Brett Kirk medal in both of those.
Thanks, Basil.
James Rowbottom had his say, too.
That round 15 game was not as close as the score implied.
Now, they worked some of it back late. The Giants have had this happen a few times this year. Really, the one time it didn't was against the Bulldogs in the closing round. The times where they've lost handily didn't look as bad in terms of the scoring front because they were able to work back a few late. So you can look at that, or you can look at just the finals trends between these teams. I'm hoping more Americans will look at this on FS1, and we'll do our damnedest to get our friends to keep their eyes on it.
The advantage
By the way,
of FS1, I think, is that you're much more likely to have it on at a random bar in the background than FS2, and that just gets more random eyes onto the game.
By the way, you know how we were talking up Frenchie? Turns out he is out. Cam McKenzie did his hamstring.
Ooh, well, there's a place for CJ.
Yeah, that broke as we recorded.
Slide Harry Morrison further forward then?
Half forward flank Morrison, that seems pretty logical.
There's your spot for CJ.
Yeah, just maybe some center wing time for Morrison could factor in too. Something that still bothers me as we think about this last final for week 1, the first elimination final between the Lions and Blues, is that of the 4 opening round matchups this year, only one was actually a double up, that being the Suns and Tigers. Well, we're getting an opening round rematch at the same venue, actually, thanks to, well, Fremantle falling flat on their faces.
Hello and welcome to Standing Up School. And you fail.
7:30 p.m. local at the Gamma. For Americans, 5:30 a.m. Eastern, 2:30 Pacific on FS2. This is your 5-8 matchup with the teams separated by a game and a half.
I think it's fair to say no matter what happens in this game, it's going to be funny. Like, either outcome is hilarious. Because either it'll be like, come on, Frio, you couldn't beat that. We had to sit through that. Or you just laugh at Brisbane for, you lost to that? The team that shouldn't even be here? So really can't go wrong.
What do you remember about the opening round game, which was a 1-point Blues win?
Brisbane got up really big by 32 after a quarter, 31 at half. And then the final quarter and a half were basically all within a goal, and Carlton held on to win by 1.
It was a 46-point margin partway through the second quarter. And then David Cunningham started a run of 8 straight Carlton goals to give them the lead within the third quarter.
See, I kept telling people he was like quietly spectacular during that game. Like, nobody remembers it.
And now he's done for the year and may just be done. Harry Mackay had the winner with 71 seconds left, and then he also prevented an insufficient intent free kick with 9 seconds left. That snapped a long drought for Carlton at the Gabba, and it was Michael Voss's first win over the Lions as head coach. That was just an incredibly tight game the whole way through. The margin was within a goal, less than a goal, in fact, for the final 54 minutes of time on Thank You Swamp.
Also, of course, have to think back to their preliminary final meeting last year, their most recent finals meeting, a game that the Lions won by 16 after going behind by the first 5 goals. I think they gave up. A late Jack Martin goal was a bad beat, and then the siren went forever.
Yeah, I think the Lions countered a 5-goal quarter with one of their own. And that was just the Jared Berry, Josh Dunkley, and Lachie Neal triumvirate winning them that game. Berry played in round 24, wasn't his best self, but had he been able to play through the game against Collingwood the prior week, I think he could be talking about a double chance Lions team, just because Berry is the answer in terms of tagging. So Jared Berry versus Patrick Cripps, one possible. Here we go.
Here we go.
And then I would assume Alex Chincotta goes to Lachie Neal, assuming he's in the team.
Well, there's been less tagging from Chincotta in the prior weeks, so I'm not entirely sure. Plus, there's just a wave of Blues to come in. No pun intended. How about we start with somebody who tore his ACL in that opening round matchup? Remember, there were 2 ACLs torn in the first half. Kadeem Coleman tore his in the second quarter, but Sam Doherty had torn his in the first. Just over half a year later, he's going to be back.
This is awesome. Also, did he just have a kid?
They have their second on the way.
That's what it is. Okay. So, congrats on the sex and congrats on the incredibly fast return from what looked like a super devastating injury to someone who, even the biggest Carlton haters have a positive opinion of.
Think about just everything he suffered through in terms of the cancer, the ACLs, everything. You got to pull for the guy.
If there is one Carlton thing I will be happy about, it is this guy.
And then there's everything else for Carlton. They will be without former Hawaii Rainbow Warrior Matthew Owes because of a dangerous tackle suspension.
Which took forever for the tribunal to deal with.
And then the Blues were like, wait, he's a good bloke. Doesn't matter. And then there's everything else. You're looking at, 7 other potential inclusions? I think we can split this up into tiers in terms of more and less likely. For round 22, the Coleman Twin Towers of Charlie Curnow and Harry Mackay are trending toward likely, and Mitch McGovern and Zach Williams had hamstring concerns from round 23 against the Eagles. They're also, though, more likely to feature, and however Williams figures into things will really interest me. There's potential to always go back in support, but he has played much of the year, especially coming back the first time, as a half forward.
I would have thought when Williams moved up that he would have been in more of a pressure forward role. And instead he's had some of the fewest pressure acts of anybody, and yet has still been a pretty effective player in what he's done. I just think there's another level that they can unlock out of him where he continues to do his forward work, but also puts on a bunch of pressure acts, which would be pretty terrifying.
He'd be giving up quite a bit of height if you tried to play him on Harris Andrews. What is the plan here with Andrews, actually? We've seen the effectiveness of defensive forwards against him.
I don't know. See, that's one where it's if Owes was in, that's what I would have him do.
When do you think he's too short for that job?
He is shorter, and I would still go with it anyway, because I think he just fit the role really well.
Actually, looking at it, there's only a 1 centimeter height difference between Will Hoskin-Elliott and Zach Williams. Yeah, go for that then.
Yeah, that seems like a good move.
Wise for the Blues, Adam Chera.
Woof, not woof.
I don't know why you're confused by that. Tom DeConing and Jack Martin are all tests. I would put Williams in over Martin if both are available because of the defensive forward capabilities there. I mean, we saw Zach Williams also do kind of a patrolling job to keep Dan Houston out of the game in that win in Adelaide at the end of May. And so he's just got more defensive forward capability, I think. That is really going to be valuable if he can go. If DeConing is ready, considering the matchup, what do you do regarding Mark Pittonet?
You tell him, sorry, man, we're going to play DeConing. You've totally convinced me that DeConing is the right guy to go with, if possible, which I certainly didn't feel that way earlier in the year.
And if you think back to opening round, it was just DeConing.
And I say this as someone who does like Pittonet, but I think if you're only going to play one of the two, I really think DeConing's the one.
You're onto my whole Mark Pittonet's a half-trick pony thing?
I mean, I think if Pittonet gets you a bunch of hitouts to advantage, I think he's awesome.
But he hasn't gotten that reliably enough.
Yeah, and I think against Oscar McInerney, who seems to have played a much better second half of the season, I don't think he can really count on that. Jack Payne and Bruce Reville both played in the BFL last week. Payne's been out since round 17. I would think you get him back in, and it would probably be, well, I think Noah Answorth clearly misses because you're also getting Brandon Sarcevic back, who, like I've said, jokes about his uncle, I guess, aside, has been really, really good. Looking at their lineup from the game against Brisbane, yeah, Dara Joyce would come out as well, I would think. You just go Joyce and Answorth out, maybe Connor McKenna as well. That's another one to consider. Their sub in that last game was Harry Sharp. So yeah, maybe you make Bruce the sub. I would think maybe one or so of those three guys will end up staying in, but I think those are like the obvious ones on the chopping block, yeah?
I would think. It seems like, though, the coaching staff has given Connor McKenna some moral license as of late, so I would say Answorth and Joyce may be at greater risk ahead of McKenna. You will need some of that rebounding, and then just when I think of Jack Payne, honestly, if I think about his defining game, it was, round 8 of last year, I think, where he held Charlie Curnow goalless when they played one-on-one. Curnow got a goal against somebody else in that game. That was like peak Zach Voss era.
So I guess the most obvious questions then would just boil down to, if we consider, I guess, Starcevic and Payne for Answorth and Joyce as a mostly certainty, then it would just be like, does Reville get back in for Sharp or McKenna possibly?
Switch things up for this last one, Ethan. Why will the Brisbane Lions not win the flag?
This is going to be consistent with what I've said all year. Burned out too early. Starting off 0-3, having to climb their way back in it. I don't think they are the healthiest team heading into this, and while their best is still really good, the fact is they're going to be more exhausted than a team like I had pointed to, Geelong, who really benefited from that 7-0 start.
Mine will be decapitated steak. The expression cut the head off the snake means, you take care of the biggest problem first, and the head of the snake, that is the Brisbane Lions, would be Harris Andrews. If you can take care of him, everything else opens up. And even if Brandon Starcevic does a great job against one small, if you have even two damaging smalls, wash the fuck out. You think about why the Giants were able to sweep the Lions in the home and away this year. They had really a three-pronged small attack. Yeah, you can stop Toby Green, but then Brent Daniels and Darcy Jones at his helmet were just going to get you all the same. So I think always being out is actually really damaging for Carlton from that standpoint, and somebody else is going to have to pick up the slack. I'm thinking in particular, Jesse Motlop. Why will the Lions win the flag?
It's all coming together at the right time. Midfield's awesome. Lachie Neal's finally going to get his. And this is a team that's been knocking on the door for so long and definitely has what it takes to finally get over the edge.
So what are your 3 words? About damn time?
I guess so. What about you?
Tell it if accurate. We know what the rest of the ground can do, but if the Lions can just tidy up a bit of their goal accuracy, and I think a lot of that will come from the smaller forwards because Joe Danaher will Joe Danaher. If Charlie Cameron and Kyle Lohman can both get involved early, both kick goals early in games, I can see this team just being an unstoppable force. We've complimented everything else about them. I feel like just the one issue outside the defensive 50 is cleanliness a bit on the smaller side. And it would just feel so right as well for Kyle Lohman to be a big part of that. A bit of a passing of the torch there in conjunction with team success.
I could also see Will Ashcroft having a really good finals run. That's another part that could kind of line up with just things rounding into form at the right time. Him conveniently getting healthy when everything else is starting to click.
And Jasper Fletcher, I think, is one who could spring up for a couple important moments, too.
All right. Why will Carlton win the flag?
How about why they'll lose it first?
Okay. Why will Carlton lose the flag?
Too many changes. Even with 2 weeks in between, the uncertainty around a lot of players could, I think, just really confound strategy talks going up to this game. If they could get through this week, then I think it's just an issue of quality. But you got to get through this one first, and the Lions are nearly 4-goal favorites, 23.5, and I think that's appropriate.
I think that line is blown out a bit much, and I think with a possibly healthier opponent, that could come down quite a bit, which we should know about, I guess, within the next couple hours to an extent, maybe at least the extended team. I'm not sure with, Thursday game, how that's all going to work out.
Why do you think Carlton will not win?
Defense. This is a team that's given up a lot of triple-digit scores, and they're going to be facing teams that have put up triple-digit scores regularly, and that defense just hasn't performed most of the time against really good opponents, as much as I love Jacob Wiedering.
That's all Australian Jacob Wiedering.
Well deserved.
I guess part of it then does rest on, for example, McGovern's health and all this, and just how they can help around Wiedering as a team. I think a better true intercepting role from Nick Newman could do a lot. If he could add, 4 or 5 more intercepts to the rebound game he could already provide. And again, he's not maybe the one to unleash that big rebound kick, but he's just intelligent as to pick, all right, who's going to do this next?
All right. I guess I'll ask you first. Why will Carlton win the flag?
You talked about a legacy run for Bond. I'm thinking a Patrick Cripps legacy run, in all honesty. If there's any reason that this team could do it from 8th, then I feel like everything would just kind of gravitate around him. And he's been allowed to play a bit more freely this year, especially in the middle third. I think the Elijah Hollins acquisition for a bag of chips, basically, cold chips, has done so much to help Cripps return to a more natural role. And speaking of Hollins, Ollie had a nice round 24, even though the team wasn't able to bring it home. Why do you think the Blues could do it?
I have 2 answers. One is more sincere than the other. There is no God. Okay, the other answer is just star power or strength through the middle. When you have McGovern linking from kind of that halfback role and a midfield of Cripps and Sam Walsh, who could turn the switch and all of a sudden be back onto the form he showed early in the year, and a forward line anchored by a couple of Coleman winners, you've got a team that can just beat you right through the guts and just turn games into, here's our best, here's your best, let's dance. And Carlton's best ends up winning out.
With that, then, I think we're prepared to take on this first week of finals and whatever the team selection hands us.
Do we do main character predictions?
Yeah, we do. Our round 24 main character was the entire Carlton Football Club for Bradburying their way into finals. And I am going to rule out Sam Doherty as a potential option.
Yeah, he's too obvious. I'll let you go first, though.
I am going to go with that last game, though. It's going to be that one section of Gabba fans again, countering any Blues Brothers attempts with something even more ridiculous because it's finals time.
I actually just thought of another player. I don't think he's going to necessarily be, you know what? I will make him a main character pick because I think he's had a relatively quiet year. I think he could totally go off. Zach Bailey. I have a secondary main character pick, though, that I would feel really stupid if I didn't at least bring up. Grimace. Someone's going to go full Mets and, call on Grimace for support. Also, I saw a tweet saying, what if he's Italian and it's actually pronounced Grimace? And I've just been thinking about that a lot. Yeah, Zach Bailey is on my list of, guys who have had relatively quiet years that can turn it on and just, catapult their team to a flag. I put Mark Blitzobs in that similar category.
Bailey, just a really dynamic player who I think with the emergence of Lohman in particular, and a bit of Ashcroft as well in terms of some of the forward ability, has taken a back seat this year. But he's still averaged a goal a game and has been a bit more accurate, kicking 18-9. So the potential is obviously there. He's got to just seize it. And Bailey's always a guy that I've liked too. And, Zach Bailey and I have something in common.
You're bad at hitting the gritty.
Yeah, I kind of spoon-fed that one to you.
With that, that's really going to put the wraps on this episode. Happy finals. I hope it's a happy finals, at least for me. I'm really only looking out for myself here. We're going to, of course, stay very active on Twitter at Americans Footy. We're also going to keep an eye on which players visit here for the offseason, because I would feel really bad if I missed out on meeting another, like how close I came to meeting Harry Sheezel last year. Seems like a bunch of the Roos are in Bali right now. Obviously, we are not. We're pretty far away from there. But hope they have a good time.
Hoping that some players show up to the LA Dragons grand final watch party, because we've had that happen in the past.
Or maybe the Ravens-Chargers game, or any college football game at Cal or Stanford or even San Jose State.
Where's the closest that Tulsa plays?
I don't think they come that close this year.
We're asking because of Brian Myers' friend Angus Davies.
Yeah, I think their home games might actually be the closest. They go to Denton, which I don't know if that's necessarily closer. They're hosting Oklahoma State in their little stadium. That's kind of neat. But yeah, follow us. And if you happen to be listening to this and you are an AFL player, we will happily hit you with all the restaurant recommendations and everything you need to have a successful American vacation, because I've done like the exact same sort of trip in the summertime, basically. Just like go to a city, go to a bunch of games, and yeah, I'll show you all the good restaurants.
He is on Twitter at Castle Media. I'm at BenjaminHK01. The executive producer is on Instagram at catnamebrian. And
everybody have a happy football!